Billionaire CEO brings a fake girlfriend to his ex's wedding. Everyone's stunned by her. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The rain came down in silver sheets across Manhattan, streaking against the glass towers and pooling in the gutters along Fifth Avenue. Inside a quiet corner cafe, Sophia Reed sat hunched over a chipped mug of coffee, her notebook of unpaid bills and half-written job applications spread across the table. She had barely enough left in her bank account to cover next month's rent, and her student loans loomed like a shadow she could not outrun. Every sip of coffee tasted like borrowed time. The door chimed. A man stepped in, tall, dark suit tailored to perfection, the kind of presence that made the room pause for just a second. Sophia did not look up at first, but when she did, her breath caught. She knew his face from magazines and business channels. Adrian Blackwood, the billionaire CEO of Blackwood Enterprises, a man rumored to turn every venture into gold, and the man who had once been engaged to New York's most glamorous socialite. He did not order a drink. He walked straight to Sophia's table as if he had been searching for her. She blinked, confused, as he slid into the seat across from her without invitation. His voice was low, steady, carrying the authority of someone used to commanding boardrooms. "Miss Reed," he said, meeting her startled eyes, "I need you to pretend to be my girlfriend, just for one night." Sophia almost laughed, certain she had misheard. "I am sorry. What?" Adrian leaned closer, the storm outside casting sharp shadows across his face. "My ex-fiancée is getting married this weekend. I intend to be there, but I will not give her the satisfaction of thinking she broke me. I need someone believable, someone real. That is where you come in." Her pulse hammered in her ears. "You do not even know me." His expression did not waver. He reached into his leather briefcase and placed a folder on the table. Inside, a contract with clean, decisive lines, and beside it, a velvet box. When he flipped it open, the diamond ring inside caught the cafe's dim light like fire. "This is not romance," Adrian said. "This is business. You will be compensated generously. Enough to settle debts. Enough to give you breathing room. All you have to do is stand by my side and play the part." Sophia stared at the ring, then at the contract. Her throat went dry. Every rational part of her screamed that this was insane. Yet the stack of overdue bills in front of her seemed to whisper back, daring her to imagine what life could be like if she said yes. The storm outside grew heavier, rattling the windows. Adrian waited in silence, his gaze steady, as if he already knew her answer. Sophia's fingers brushed the edge of the contract. For the first time in months, she felt the weight of choice in her hands, terrifying and intoxicating all at once. This was not how she had imagined her life would change, but it was the kind of proposal that could not be ignored. Sophia could not sleep that night. The sound of the storm outside her apartment window echoed the storm in her chest. She sat at the edge of her small bed, staring at the folder Adrian had left with her. The contract was crisp, the language precise, every clause mapped out like a business transaction. Her name already typed in at the top as if he had known she would eventually sign. By morning, her eyes were heavy, but her mind was set. The eviction notice pinned to her fridge, the stack of student loan statements, the phone calls from collection agencies, none of it was going away. She needed a way out, even if that way was through a deal with a man like Adrian Blackwood. When she arrived back at the cafe, he was already there, seated at the same table where their conversation had begun. His suit was a different shade today, charcoal instead of black, but his presence was just as commanding. He did not ask whether she had made up her mind. He simply looked at her, waiting. Sophia placed the signed contract in front of him. Her fingers trembled as she slid the folder across the table. Adrian's eyes lingered on her face for a moment before he opened it, scanning quickly. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "Good," he said. "We begin immediately." She swallowed hard. "What does that mean?" "It means," he replied smoothly, "that you are stepping into my world, Miss Reed, and my world requires preparation." The next hours blurred together, like a montage from someone else's life. A town car waited outside, sleek and polished, the leather interior smelling faintly of cedar. She was whisked across the city to an upscale boutique where racks of gowns gleamed like jewels under soft lighting. Stylists swarmed around her, measuring, pinning, adjusting, their voices a chorus of commands. Sophia caught her reflection in the mirror and almost laughed. Just yesterday she had been a woman counting quarters to buy coffee. Now she was standing under a chandelier while a team argued over whether sapphire blue or emerald green made her eyes stand out more. Adrian observed from a distance, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Every so often, his gaze would flicker toward her, as though assessing not just the clothes, but the way she carried herself. At one point, as the stylist fussed with a necklace, Sophia muttered under her breath, "This is insane." Adrian's voice answered calmly from behind her. "It is only insane if you forget why you are here. Remember, this is not about you. This is about convincing everyone else." The final dress chosen was a deep emerald silk that clung to her frame and caught the light with every movement. For the first time in years, Sophia barely recognized the woman in the mirror. Elegant, composed, almost like she belonged. The next lesson was etiquette. In a private dining room at a luxury hotel, Adrian sat across from her as a trainer demonstrated how to hold silverware, how to pace conversation, how to answer probing questions without revealing too much. Sophia stumbled, stammered, dropped her fork once, and flushed crimson when she mispronounced the name of a vintage wine. But she kept trying, determination hardening her posture. Adrian watched silently, offering no praise, only corrections. "Slower," he said when she spoke too quickly. "Straighter," when her shoulders slumped. It was not cruelty, it was precision. Yet she felt the pressure of his expectations pressing against her chest like a weight. That evening, exhausted, she collapsed into the back of the town car as the skyline glittered past the window. She wanted to ask him why he had chosen her of all people. She wanted to know why a man with his resources, his wealth, and his influence would risk his reputation on a waitress drowning in debt. But when she glanced at him, seated across from her, his jaw set and his eyes fixed on the city beyond, she stayed silent. Some questions, she realized, had answers she was not ready to hear. As the car pulled up to her apartment, Adrian finally spoke. "Remember, Sophia, in 3 days, we stand together at that wedding. If you falter, the deal ends. Do you understand?" She nodded, gripping the handle of her worn leather bag like an anchor. "I understand." The driver opened the door, and Sophia stepped out into the night air. The weight of her decision pressed harder with each step toward her apartment door. Yet somewhere deep inside, a flicker of something unexpected stirred a mixture of fear, determination, and an odd, unspoken curiosity about the man who had just entangled her life with his. Behind her, the town car pulled away, its taillights vanishing into the Manhattan traffic. Sophia stood alone under the glow of the street lamp, contract signed, future uncertain, and heart racing with the knowledge that there was no turning back. The countdown to the wedding had begun. 2 days passed in a blur of fittings, posture lessons, and rehearsals for a role Sophia had never dreamed she would have to play. Every morning began with a car waiting outside her apartment, and every evening ended with her collapsing back into bed, her body sore from hours of being molded into someone she was not. She felt like clay in Adrian Blackwood's hands, reshaped to fit an image of elegance and control. On the third morning, she was escorted into the marble lobby of Blackwood Enterprises. The glass walls stretched upward like a cathedral, and the sound of her heels echoed against the polished floor. Men in tailored suits and women in sleek dresses rushed past, their gazes flicking toward her, curious but discreet. Sophia tugged at her jacket, suddenly aware that no amount of expensive tailoring could erase the feeling of being out of place. Adrian appeared at the top of the staircase, descending with the quiet authority of a man who owned every corner of the building. His eyes found hers immediately. "You are late," he said. Sophia bristled. "By 2 minutes." In my world, 2 minutes can collapse an empire." He handed her a slim envelope. "Your itinerary for the wedding. Study it. Know it better than you know yourself." Inside the envelope were names, relationships, and the kind of details that only someone obsessed with control would prepare. The bride was Elise Laurent, daughter of a French banking family, Adrian's ex-fiancée. The groom was Marcus Hale, a venture capitalist. The guest list read like a map of power itself: politicians, investors, media moguls. Sophia's stomach churned. That evening, Adrian insisted she accompany him to a private dinner at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. It was not for pleasure, but for training. "Consider this a rehearsal," he said as the maitre d' guided them to a candlelit table. The silverware gleamed, the glasses sparkled, and the air smelled faintly of truffle and aged wine. Sophia sat stiffly, aware of every eye on them. When the waiter approached, she froze, almost fumbling the menu. Adrian intervened smoothly, ordering for both of them, with the confidence of a man used to control. "You cannot afford hesitation," he said quietly once the waiter left. "Every pause, every slip, will be noticed." She clenched her fists under the table. "You make it sound like a war." His expression softened for just a flicker of a second. "It is." Dinner unfolded, like a lesson disguised as conversation. Adrian pressed her with questions, sharp and sudden, forcing her to respond without stumbling. "What do you think of Laurent Holdings? How did we meet? Why are we together?" Each time she hesitated, he corrected, his tone clipped but never cruel. She began to realize this was not just about appearances. This was about survival in a world that measured every glance and every word like currency. By dessert, she was drained. When the waiter poured coffee, Sophia muttered, "Maybe you should have hired an actress." Adrian leaned back, studying her carefully. "Actresses play roles. They sell illusions. I do not need an illusion. I need authenticity." The word hung in the air, heavier than the velvet curtains around them. Sophia looked down at her hands, uncertain what he meant. As they left the restaurant, the night air sharp with winter's edge, Adrian paused on the sidewalk. The city hummed around them, yellow cabs streaking past, steam rising from the grates. "Tomorrow we travel upstate for the wedding," he said. "Once we arrive, there is no turning back. Do you understand?" Sophia nodded, though her heart hammered in her chest. "I understand." For a moment, the silence between them shifted. He looked at her, not as a man sizing up an employee, but as something else, something unspoken. Then the moment was gone. Adrian gestured to the waiting car, and she slipped inside, her pulse still racing. Back in her apartment that night, Sophia laid out the emerald dress on her bed, its silk catching the dim glow of the lamp. She touched the fabric with trembling fingers. In less than 24 hours, she would walk into a room filled with billionaires and power brokers, pretending to be the girlfriend of one of the most formidable men in the city. But as her eyes drifted closed, she could not shake the image of Adrian's expression when he had said he needed authenticity. She wondered if beneath the contracts and the diamonds, the stern rules and the rehearsals, there was something else he was not ready to admit even to himself. The clock ticked toward midnight. Outside, the city never slept. And for Sophia, neither did the fear or the strange anticipation that tomorrow would change everything. The morning of the wedding arrived with a sky heavy and gray. A thin drizzle slicked the streets as the black town car pulled up in front of Sophia's apartment. She stepped outside carrying a single worn bag, her heart thudding like a drum inside her chest. The emerald dress had been pressed to perfection, her hair styled by a professional the night before. Yet despite the transformation, she still felt like an imposter walking into a story that was never meant to be hers. Adrian was already inside the car. He looked impeccable in a tailored black tuxedo, his cufflinks catching the dim light like small shards of silver. He gave her a brief nod, his expression unreadable. "We will arrive in 2 hours," he said simply. "Use the time to go over the names again." Sophia opened the envelope he had given her days earlier. The list of guests blurred in her vision. Politicians, investors, socialites. Every name carried power and history. She tried to memorize details, repeating them quietly under her breath. Adrian watched, silent, his gaze steady, as if he were measuring her resolve. When they arrived at the sprawling estate, Sophia's breath caught. The mansion rose like a monument, its stone facade glowing under strings of golden lights. Valets hurried to park luxury cars, and guests in shimmering gowns and sharp suits flowed toward the grand entrance. The world Sophia had only glimpsed in magazines now stood before her, overwhelming and dazzling. Adrian stepped out first, his presence commanding immediate attention. Cameras flashed, though they were meant for the bride and groom. When he extended his hand to help her out of the car, Sophia hesitated for a heartbeat. Then she placed her hand in his, her fingers trembling slightly. Together they walked into the blaze of light. Whispers rippled through the crowd the moment they entered. Heads turned, eyes widened, conversations hushed. Sophia felt every glance like a weight pressing against her skin. She heard fragments carried on the air. Who is she? A new actress? Impossible. He brought a date? Inside the ballroom, chandeliers rained light onto polished marble floors. Music drifted from a string quartet, soft and elegant. Waiters glided past with silver trays of champagne. Adrian guided her effortlessly through the sea of people, his hand steady at her back. He leaned down just enough to murmur, "Smile. Do not let them see your fear." She forced a smile, though her heart pounded. Then came the first test. At the edge of the ballroom, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice like glass stepped forward. Sophia recognized her from the envelope notes Margot Hale, the groom's sister. Margot's gaze swept over Sophia like a blade. "Adrian," she said smoothly, "I did not realize you had found someone so quickly. Tell me, where exactly did you meet?" Sophia's throat tightened. For a second, the answer evaporated. Then, Adrian's earlier drills rose in her memory. She lifted her chin and replied evenly, "We met in the city, at a cafe. It was not planned, but sometimes the best things never are." Margot's smile was thin, almost mocking. "How charming." She leaned closer. "And what is it you do, Miss Reed?" Sophia's palms dampened, but she steadied her voice. "I am an artist, small scale for now, but it keeps me dreaming." Margot's eyebrow arched, but before she could reply, Adrian interjected. "And she is extraordinary at it." His tone was final, unchallengeable. Margot hesitated, then stepped back, her smile brittle. As the evening wore on, Sophia found herself drifting between conversations, each one a test. Questions came like arrows. Where did you grow up? What schools? What family? And though she faltered once or twice, she managed to hold her ground. Adrian remained at her side, a quiet pillar, intervening when the questions grew too sharp. When the bride and groom entered the room, applause erupted. Elise Laurent was radiant in ivory silk, her arm linked with Marcus Hale's. Yet when Elise's eyes met Adrian's across the ballroom, the glow faltered for just a breath. Sophia caught the flicker, the unspoken tension, and suddenly understood why this night mattered so much to him. Later, on the terrace outside, the night air cool against her flushed skin, Sophia finally let herself breathe. She leaned against the stone railing, staring out at the gardens, glowing with lantern light. Adrian joined her, his presence quiet but undeniable. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he said softly, "You did well tonight." Sophia glanced at him, surprised by the trace of warmth in his voice. "I thought I nearly fell apart." "You held together when it mattered," he said. His eyes lingered on her, not as a businessman judging a performance, but as a man seeing something unexpected. The silence between them deepened, charged with something neither had prepared for. Sophia looked away first, her heart racing. Inside, music swelled, laughter rang, and the night pressed forward. But on that terrace, beneath the lanterns and the weight of everything unsaid, something fragile and dangerous had begun to shift. The ballroom glittered with celebration, but on the terrace, Sophia felt the weight of every stare that had followed her throughout the evening. She had managed to smile, to answer questions, to play her part, yet deep down she was still the same woman who had been counting coins at a cafe table days earlier. Her fingers gripped the railing as if to anchor herself in reality. Adrian stood beside her, silent. His presence was steady, but she could feel the storm beneath his composure. When the doors opened again, and more guests spilled onto the terrace, Adrian straightened, slipping seamlessly back into his role as the untouchable billionaire. He placed a hand lightly at the small of Sophia's back, guiding her forward. "Remember," he whispered, "every interaction is a test." They returned inside. The music shifted to something livelier. and couples began to drift onto the dance floor. A few eyes turned toward Adrian, expectant, curious. Elise Laurent, the bride, was among them. Her smile was bright, but when her gaze flicked to Sophia, it carried a sharpness that stung. "Would you like to dance?" Adrian asked, his voice low but deliberate. Sophia's heart skipped. She wanted to say no, afraid of stumbling in front of so many people, but the intensity in his eyes left her no choice. "Yes," she whispered. He led her onto the polished marble floor. The chandeliers shimmered above, casting a golden glow over the room. As the music swelled, Adrian's hand settled against her waist, firm and guiding, while her other hand rested in his. For a moment, the noise of the room faded, and there was only the rhythm of the music and the strength of his hold. "You are shaking," he murmured. "Everyone is watching," she admitted. "Good," he said. "Let them." They moved together, her steps awkward at first, then slowly aligning with his. She felt his control, the way he guided her, every turn measured, every motion confident. And then something shifted. She realized she was no longer just following. She was part of the rhythm, part of him. When the song ended, there was a ripple of polite applause. Sophia caught the glances, some surprised, some approving, others skeptical. Adrian bowed his head slightly toward her, as if to say, "Well done." But the night was not finished testing her. At the champagne table, a group of guests gathered, their laughter edged with cruelty. One of them, a man Sophia recognized as a business rival from the dossier, sneered loudly enough for others to hear. "So, this is the woman who managed to tame Adrian Blackwood. Tell us, Miss Reed, how much does a performance like yours cost?" The words cut through the music, sharp and humiliating. A hush fell over the nearby crowd. Sophia's face burned, her pulse thundering. Every instinct urged her to run. But then she remembered Adrian's drills, his warnings, his command. "Smile. Do not let them see your fear." She lifted her chin. "It costs nothing," she said evenly, her voice carrying across the circle of onlookers. "Unless you consider honesty and dignity a price. If so, then I suppose it is priceless." For a second, silence reigned. Then a few murmurs of approval rippled through the group. The rival's smirk faltered, and Adrian stepped closer, his gaze like steel. "Careful," he said coldly. "Insults have a way of circling back." The man looked away, defeated. Adrian guided Sophia aside, his touch gentler than before. "You handled that well," he said, a trace of pride in his tone. Inside, Sophia's heart was still racing, but for the first time she felt she had not just survived this world, she had stood her ground in it. Later, as the night stretched into quiet hours, Sophia slipped away to the edge of the garden. The lanterns glowed softly among the hedges, the laughter from inside muffled by distance. She drew in a deep breath, steadying herself. Adrian found her there. He did not speak at once. He simply stood beside her, watching the shadows play across the grass. "Finally," he said, "you are stronger than you think." She glanced at him, surprised. "You make me feel like I am on trial every second." That is because you are," he admitted. "This world is unforgiving. If you show weakness, they will tear you apart." His voice dropped, quieter now. "But tonight, you proved them wrong." For a moment, neither moved. The air between them was charged, heavy with something unspoken. Then, as footsteps approached from the house, Adrian's expression hardened again, the softness gone. He turned back toward the lights, his hand brushing lightly against hers before slipping away. Sophia stood frozen, her heart pounding, wondering whether that fleeting moment had been real or just another part of the performance. The wedding reception stretched late into the night, but Sophia barely remembered the final hours. Faces blurred, conversations tangled together, and the endless clinking of glasses echoed in her mind. By the time the guests began to depart, she felt drained, as though she had been holding her breath for hours. Adrian's town car carried them back to the hotel, reserved for his stay. The silence inside the vehicle was heavy, broken only by the sound of rain against the windows. Sophia sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, unsure if she should speak. Adrian stared straight ahead, his jaw tense, his eyes unreadable. When they reached the penthouse suite, The door closed behind them with a soft thud. For the first time all evening, they were alone. Sophia slipped off her heels, her feet aching, and leaned against the edge of a velvet chair. Adrian removed his cufflinks with deliberate precision, setting them on the table one by one. "You did well," he said finally, his voice low. Sophia let out a shaky laugh. "I thought I was going to faint half the night." "You did not," Adrian replied, glancing at her. "And that is what matters. You stood your ground. You made them believe." His gaze lingered, longer than it should have. Sophia shifted under the weight of it. She wanted to ask what he saw when he looked at her, but the words tangled in her throat. Adrian turned away, pouring himself a glass of water. For a moment, the facade of control cracked, and she caught a glimpse of something raw beneath it. Loneliness, perhaps, or pain. He stood by the window, staring out at the rain-slick skyline. Sophia approached cautiously. "You said tonight was about proving something to them, but I think it was also about proving something to yourself." His shoulders tensed. "You should not assume you know me." "Maybe not," she said softly, "but I know what it looks like when someone is pretending they are unbreakable." Adrian turned sharply, his eyes flashing. Then, to her surprise, the tension broke into a quiet, bitter laugh. "Pretending has been my entire life, Miss Reed. Power is nothing more than a performance. You keep the mask on, or you lose everything." Sophia's heart ached at the words. She had expected arrogance, but not this hollow truth hiding beneath his armor. She stepped closer, her voice gentle. "Masks slip, eventually. And maybe that is not such a bad thing." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Adrian's gaze softened, his expression shifting from steel to something almost vulnerable. Then he looked away, as though afraid of what she might see if he held her eyes too long. "Get some rest," he said finally, his tone clipped again. "Tomorrow, appearances continue." Sophia retreated to her room, but sleep would not come easily. She lay awake, replaying every detail of the evening, the stares, the whispers, the way Adrian's hand had steadied her on the dance floor, the fleeting moment on the terrace when his guard had slipped. Somewhere in the middle of this charade, something real had begun to take root, and it terrified her. The next morning, the sunlight streamed through heavy curtains. Sophia emerged to find Adrian already dressed, seated at the table with a tablet in hand. He looked composed, every trace of the previous night erased. "There is a charity gala next week," he said without looking up. "We will attend together. Consider it your second exam." Sophia groaned. "I barely survived the first one." His lips curved faintly, almost a smile. "Then you are already ahead of expectations." "Ugh." She shook her head, muttering. "You are impossible." "And yet," Adrian replied smoothly, "you are still here." The words lingered long after breakfast ended. Sophia wondered if he meant them as a challenge, or if they carried a meaning he was not ready to admit. As the day passed, preparations for the gala began. New fittings, new instructions, new reminders of the role she had agreed to play. But beneath the surface of rehearsed smiles and contracts, Sophia could not shake the memory of Adrian's unguarded moment by the window. For the first time, she began to realize the danger was not only in being discovered as a fraud. The greater danger was in the possibility that this arrangement, this performance, might no longer feel like an act. And that possibility, more than any rival or rumor, was what truly frightened her. The gala unfolded in a blaze of chandeliers and polished marble. Sophia walked beside Adrian, her hand lightly resting on his arm, the weight of every stare pressing down on her once again. She had trained for this, rehearsed every answer, every gesture. Yet as the cameras flashed and the crowd whispered, she felt the same unease crawling along her spine. Inside, the room buzzed with power. Politicians, heirs, and executives moved like pieces on a chessboard, every smile calculated, every laugh rehearsed. Adrian carried himself like a king among them, untouchable, commanding. But the higher they climbed through the evening, the sharper the daggers hidden in the crowd became. Near the end of the night, the first blow landed. A reporter, emboldened by wine and whispers, stepped forward with a microphone. "Mr. Blackwood," he said loudly enough to draw the room's attention, "rumor has it that your new romance is nothing more than a staged performance. Care to comment?" The words sliced through the music, silencing the room. Sophia's chest tightened. She felt every eye pivot to her, waiting for her to crumble. Adrian's jaw tightened. But before he could speak, another figure emerged, Elise Laurent, radiant in a crimson gown, her smile edged with venom. "Oh, Adrian," she purred, "you never change. Always a contract, never a commitment. Tell me, how much is this one costing you?" Gasps rippled across the crowd. Sophia's face burned. The humiliation was sharp, but worse than the whispers was the sting of betrayal. For the first time, she wondered if the cruel rumor might be true that she was nothing more than another piece in Adrian's endless game of power. She turned to him, her voice trembling but clear. "Is that what I am to you? Just a transaction?" Adrian opened his mouth, but hesitation flickered in his eyes, and that pause just long enough was enough to shatter her. Sophia stepped back, the weight of the emerald dress suddenly unbearable. "I will not be a prop in your war," she said, her voice breaking. Without waiting for his answer, she pushed through the crowd, past the cameras, past the whispers, out into the night. The city air hit her face cold and sharp, but it was nothing compared to the ache rising in her chest. Inside the gala, Adrian stood frozen, the contract and all its rules echoing back at him like a cage. For the first time in years, he had no words, no strategy, no mask strong enough to cover the truth. He had just watched the only person who saw through the armor walk away. The night after the gala was the longest of Adrian Blackwood's life. He sat alone in his penthouse, the city lights flickering beyond the glass walls, but nothing pierced the weight in his chest. The contract that once seemed like control now felt like a chain strangling him. He replayed Sophia's words over and over. "I will not be a prop in your war." For the first time, he wondered if she had been right all along. By morning, headlines blazed across financial news and society columns. Blackwood's girlfriend a hoax? Ex-fiancée exposes the billionaire. Stock tickers dipped, board members called, and whispers spread like wildfire. Yet none of it mattered compared to the emptiness left by Sophia's absence. 3 days later, the board of Blackwood Enterprises convened in the company's glass tower. Executives sat in polished suits, their voices sharp with accusation. "This scandal undermines investor confidence," one said. "The partnership with Hale Capital is at risk," another added. Adrian listened, stone-faced, until one voice demanded, "Admit the truth, Adrian. Was it all a performance?" The room held its breath. Adrian rose slowly, every eye on him. For once, he did not hide behind calculation. "Yes," he said. "It began as a contract, but I will not stand here and allow anyone to call her a lie. Sophia Reed is the most real person I have ever known. And if this company chooses to sacrifice me for telling the truth, so be it." The board erupted in murmurs, shock rippling through the chamber. Adrian did not stay to argue. He walked out, his decision already made. That evening, while the storm raged outside the cafe where it had all begun, Sophia sat alone with a cup of lukewarm coffee. She had tried to bury herself in routine, but her heart refused to settle. When the door opened, she looked up, and her breath caught. Adrian stood there, rain dripping from his coat, his eyes locked on hers. "I came without contracts," he said simply, his voice rough. "No conditions, no masks, only the truth. I was a fool to make you doubt what you are worth. I do not care about appearances, or shareholders, or headlines. I only care about you." The cafe fell silent, as if the world itself was listening. Sophia's eyes stung, her heart pounding. For the first time since the night they met, she believed him. And for the first time, Adrian was not the billionaire CEO commanding a room. He was a man stripped bare, asking for forgiveness. Sophia set down her cup, her voice trembling. "Then prove it." And in that moment, she saw the answer in his eyes. He already intended to. The following weeks unfolded like the slow mending of something once broken. Adrian did not chase headlines or board meetings. Instead, he showed up at Sophia's side in the quietest of ways, walking with her through the park in the early mornings, helping her sketch ideas for an art exhibit, even sitting in her cramped apartment with no staff. No luxury, just the smell of strong coffee and the sound of rain against the glass. For the first time, he seemed content without the armor of power. But Adrian was not a man who settled for gestures alone. One evening, he invited Sophia to a gallery in Midtown. When she stepped inside, her breath caught. The walls were lined with canvases, her own work, the sketches and paintings she had tucked away in notebooks, now framed and glowing under soft lights. A plaque at the entrance read, "The Art of Sophia Reed." She turned to him, stunned. "You did this?" Adrian nodded. "It is time the world saw you the way I do. Not as a contract, not as an arrangement, as the woman who changed everything." Tears blurred her vision as he reached into his pocket. This time, there was no folder, no terms, no conditions, only a velvet box. He opened it slowly, revealing a simple, elegant, diamond ring. "I asked you once to play a role," Adrian said, his voice unsteady. "Now I ask you for something real. Marry me, Sophia. Not for them, not for appearances, for us." The gallery seemed to vanish around her. All the fear, the doubt, the nights of pretending none of it mattered anymore. Sophia's answer came with a trembling smile. "Yes. May?" Applause rose softly from the few friends and staff gathered at the back, but Adrian barely heard them. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and for the first time, it was not a symbol of a performance. It was a promise. Months later, their wedding was nothing like the lavish spectacle society had expected. It was small, intimate, held in the very gallery that had unveiled her work. As they exchanged vows beneath the glow of her paintings, Sophia whispered, "This is the best mistake I ever made." Adrian smiled, pulling her close. "No," he said, his voice full of certainty. "It was never a mistake. It was the only thing that was ever real." And with that, the billionaire CEO and the woman who once sat in a cafe counting coins sealed their future together, not with a contract, but with love.